June 21st, 1945. Kimiko Watanabe's hand trembled as she pressed the small blade against the soft flesh beneath her jaw. The metal felt cold, final. Around her in the darkness of the collapsed storehouse, 47 women whispered prayers to ancestors they would soon join. Some clutched infants who had stopped crying hours ago, too weak from hunger to protest anymore. Others held the hands of wide-eyed children who understood just enough to be terrified, but not enough to comprehend why their mothers were preparing to kill them. Outside, the sound grew louder. Boots, heavy American boots, crunching through the volcanic gravel of Saipan. Alien voices barking commands in a language that sounded like gravel being chewed. The women pressed themselves against the splintered walls, willing their bodies to become invisible, knowing it was impossible. This was the moment they had been warned about for 3 years. The moment when the brutal Americans would storm through that door and strip away everything that made them human. Kimiko's rosary bit into her palm as she squeezed it. The small wooden beads her grandmother had given her decades ago before the war, before the world burned. She had hidden it under her kimono for months, terrified that imperial soldiers would discover her Catholic faith and label her a traitor. Now it seemed like a bitter joke. She was about to die clutching the symbol of a god the Americans supposedly worshipped too. But the propaganda had been clear. Americans had no god, no honor, no mercy. The door groaned, hinges screaming. Sunlight exploded into the darkness like a bomb, blinding them all. Kimiko's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The dishonor they had been promised, the violation every poster had screamed about, the fate worse than death. But what happened in the next 4 minutes would shatter everything these women believed about their enemy. Because mercy, when you have been taught to expect monsters, is the most disorienting weapon of all. Let me take you back to when these 3 women still had lives. Before the war devoured everything. Before propaganda turned human beings into demons in uniform. Saipan, January 1944. 18 months before the door opened. Kimiko Watanabe stood in the small Catholic church on the northern edge of the village, chalk dust on her fingers, teaching English to a dozen children whose parents paid her in rice and vegetables. She was 42 years old, a widow since Midway in 1942, when her husband's destroyer went down with all hands. She had loved him the way you love someone familiar and steady, not with passion, but with the comfortable certainty of shared routine. She kept a letter hidden beneath the floorboards of her small house. It had arrived 3 months ago through channels she did not fully understand, passed from hand to hand across the Pacific through networks of priests and nuns who still believed the church was bigger than any nation's war. Father Rodriguez in Manila had written in careful script, knowing the letter might be intercepted. "Sister," he had written, "do not believe everything you hear about the Americans. They have laws about prisoners, something called the Geneva Convention. They are required to treat captured people with dignity, to feed them, to give medical care. I have seen it myself. They are not the demons Tokyo describes." Kimiko had read that letter 100 times. She wanted desperately to believe it. But every day the loudspeakers in the village square screamed different truths. American soldiers rape women. American soldiers murder children. American soldiers have no honor, no mercy, no souls. Better to die with dignity than live in shame. 3 miles away, in a boarding house near the harbor, Yuki Tanaka sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at a photograph until her eyes burned. Kenji smiled up at her from the creased paper, 19 years old, dressed in his flight school uniform, looking impossibly young and impossibly proud. She was 19 now too. They had planned to marry after the war. In March, she received the notice. Kenji had died at Okinawa. His plane had struck an American destroyer. He had achieved transcendence. He was a hero. He was honored. He was 21 years old, and he was dead. The notice came with a letter he had written to her the night before he flew. When she finally opened it, the words destroyed her. "Yuki, my beloved, tomorrow I will become wind, but I will tell you a secret. I am terrified, not of dying, of what dying means. They tell us we will become gods. But what if we just become nothing? I love you. I wish I could have married you. Forgive me for choosing the emperor over you, but if I had the choice, I would choose you every time." Her mother's last words had been quiet but absolute. "If the Americans come, use this. Death is kinder than their hands. Protect your honor. I would rather mourn you than know you lived in shame." Yuki had nodded numb. Now, 4 months later, she still carried the blade. And some nights late, when the loneliness threatened to swallow her whole, she took it out and held it against her wrist and wondered if Kenji had the right idea. On the eastern edge of the village, Hana Nakamura woke before dawn to feed her children. Taro was 6, old enough to understand they were hungry, old enough to stop asking why. Aiko was 3, young enough to cry, but too weak to cry loudly. Hana moved through the morning routine like a ghost. Boil water. Mix the last of the rice flour into a thin gruel that was more water than substance. She was 28 years old and she felt ancient. Her husband had been conscripted 2 years ago, sent to the Philippines, and died there in some jungle whose name she could not pronounce. She was exhausted. She was terrified. She was so hungry her hands shook as she fed Aiko, spooning the thin gruel into her daughter's mouth, watching those enormous eyes blink slowly like a doll winding down. In her kimono pocket, wrapped in a leaf, Hana kept a small bundle of crushed berries. Poisonous. Insurance. If the Americans came. If what everyone said was true. She would give Taro and Aiko the paste first. Quick. Merciful. Then herself. Better dead than dishonored. Better gone than violated. She tested the paste once on a rat. The creature died in seconds, twitching twice before going still. Hana wrapped the paste back in its leaf and prayed she would never have to use it, but she kept it close, just in case. The women were led from the storehouse in a line, mothers carrying children, older women helping younger ones who could barely walk. Kimiko found herself between Yuki and Hana, 3 strangers bound by shared terror and the impossible fact that they were still breathing. The sun was too bright after 3 days in darkness. The air smelled like smoke and earth and something else, food, real food, cooking somewhere nearby. Camp Susupe appeared through the trees, a sprawling complex of tents and temporary structures surrounded by wire fencing. Not barbed wire, just boundary markers. Inside, thousands of Japanese prisoners moved about, men in one section, women and children in another. The women were processed at a station near the entrance, names recorded, medical examinations scheduled, housing assignments given. Kimiko, Yuki and Hana were assigned to the same tent. Tent 14, 20 women, 15 children. Straw mats on the ground, blankets stacked in the corner, a water drum with a ladle. Simple, clean, more than they had seen in months. That first night no one slept. They lay in the darkness listening to the sounds of the camp, and underneath it all, the absence. No shells, no gunfire, no planes, just silence. Yuki whispered into the dark, "When do you think it will happen?" What Hana answered, "Whatever they are waiting for, this cannot be real. This must be the trap." Kimiko said nothing. She was thinking about Father Rodriguez's letter, about Geneva Convention. She pressed her rosary between her palms and prayed without words, just pleading, "Let this be mercy. Please let this be mercy." Morning came with a bell, not an alarm, a dinner bell, 3 clangs, then a voice through a loudspeaker, Japanese and English both. "Breakfast, mess tent, everyone welcome." They filed out slowly, warily. The smell hit them first. Meat, eggs, bread, real bread, fresh, warm. Hannah stopped walking. Her children pulled at her hands, but she could not move. The smell was too much, too impossible. Someone touched her elbow. An American medic, older man with kind eyes. "You okay, Mom?" He gestured toward a bench. "Sit, rest, food coming." Private First Class, Roy Anderson, 19 years old, Iowa farm boy with sun-bleached hair and a face full of freckles, helped serve. Corporal Washington, 42, Georgia-born career Army cook, ladled scrambled eggs onto metal trays. Another cook added bacon, 3 strips each. Another added toast. Butter, real butter. Yuki received her tray and stared at it. "This is more food than I have seen in 6 months." Kimiko took hers with shaking hands. "Why? Why are they feeding us like this?" Murphy appeared at the end of the serving line. He saw their confusion and spoke to Hayashi, who translated. "You are prisoners under the protection of the United States military. Geneva Convention requires adequate nutrition." "This is adequate. This is abundance," Kimiko said. "This is more than we fed ourselves before the war." Murphy looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, this is just breakfast. We have lunch and dinner too." Taro grabbed a piece of bacon, bit into it. The salt and fat exploded on his tongue. He made a sound, not quite a cry, not quite a laugh, just pure sensation overwhelming a child who had been starving. He ate the bacon in 3 bites, grabbed another piece, crammed it into his mouth. Hannah started crying, silent tears running down her face as she watched her children eat. Washington saw it from the serving line. He ladled an extra scoop of eggs onto a plate, walked over, set it down in front of Taro without a word, pointed at the food. "For you, kid. Eat up." He walked away before Hannah could try to thank him. After breakfast, they were escorted to the medical tent. Doc Riley examined children first. He knelt in front of Taro, who flinched back against his mother. Riley did not push, just opened his medical bag slowly, showed him the stethoscope, listened to his own heartbeat, then held it out to Taro. "Want to hear yours?" Taro looked at Hannah. She nodded, numb. The boy leaned forward. Riley placed the stethoscope gently on his chest. The boy's eyes widened. He could hear his own heart, the proof that he was alive. The infected wound on Taro's shin was bad, red, swollen, leaking pus. Riley cleaned it with iodine. Taro screamed. Hannah tried to pull him away, but Riley's assistant held up a hand. "Wait. Please wait." Riley worked fast, cleaned the wound, applied sulfur powder, bandaged it. Then, from his bag, he pulled out a lollipop. Cherry red. Handed it to Taro. "Brave kid. This will help." Taro took the lollipop with a shaking hand, unwrapped it, tasted sugar for the first time in recent memory. His face transformed, from pain to wonder in seconds. He looked at his mother. "Mama, it is sweet." Hannah broke, just completely broke, sobbed into her hands while her son licked his lollipop. Riley stood, spoke to the translator nearby. "Tell her the leg will be fine. Penicillin shot tomorrow, keep it clean, keep it." "He will be running around in a week." Hannah looked up at Riley through tears. "Why do you heal us? We are enemies." Riley's answer, filtered through translation, was matter of fact. "Ma'am, I took an oath. First do no harm. Didn't say anything about only treating Americans. You are a human being. That is enough. Kimiko was examined by Mrs. Eleanor Davies, a Red Cross volunteer from Philadelphia, 50 years old, widow of a Navy captain killed at Pearl Harbor. Eleanor checked Kimiko's vitals. Blood pressure low, weight dangerously low, signs of malnutrition. Then she noticed the small cut on Kimiko's throat. "What happened here?" Eleanor asked through the translator. Kimiko's voice was flat. "I was preparing to die. I was not fast enough." Eleanor's face did not change. She cleaned the cut, applied iodine, bandaged it. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a rosary. Wooden beads, worn smooth. "I saw yours this morning, when you were praying. I thought you might want to know. We pray to the same God." Kimiko stared at the rosary, at Eleanor's calm face. Something fundamental shifted in her understanding. She reached into her own pocket, pulled out her grandmother's rosary, held it up. Both women looked at each other. No translation needed. Eleanor smiled, started speaking softly in Latin. "Hail Mary, full of grace." Kimiko's voice joined hers, shaking but sure. "The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women." They prayed the entire rosary together. Right there in the medical tent, a Japanese widow and an American widow, praying in a dead language. When they finished, both were crying. Eleanor touched Kimiko's hand. "I lost my husband at Pearl Harbor 4 years ago. I wanted to hate everyone Japanese. Everyone. But then I met women like you, and I realized, you are not my enemy. You are just another person trying to survive a war neither of us wanted." Kimiko could not speak. She nodded, held Eleanor's hand. They sat together in silence. Over the next 3 days, a routine established itself. Morning bell, breakfast, medical checks, supplies distributed. The women received soap, real soap, Ivory brand. They received toothbrushes, tooth powder, combs, sanitary supplies, each item given without ceremony, without demand for anything in return. On the 4th day, a Red Cross worker brought paper and pencils. "You can write letters to your families. We will send them through neutral channels." Switzerland, International Red Cross. The women stared at the paper like it was a miracle. Letters. They could write letters. They could tell their families they were alive. Hana wrote first. To Mother Nakamura in Nagasaki. "I am alive. Taro and Aiko are alive. We are prisoners on Saipan. We are fed. We are safe. Do not despair. We will come home." Kimiko wrote to her sister in Osaka. "Michiko, they told you I was dead. I am not. I am a prisoner. But I am treated with dignity. There is a nurse here who prays the rosary with me. I do not understand how enemies can be kind, but they are. I will come home soon." Yuki stared at blank paper for an hour. She finally wrote one letter. "To my mother, if she still lives. I am alive. I am a prisoner. I am treated humanely. I do not know why. I do not know anything anymore. If you receive this, please write back. I need to know someone is left." That night in Tent 14, the women talked. Quiet voices in darkness. "When do you think they will ask for payment?" One woman whispered. "For the food, the medicine, the blankets. No one gives this much without wanting something." Silence. Then Kimiko spoke. "Maybe they do not want anything. Maybe this is their law, this Geneva Convention." "That is naive," a hard voice cut in. Lieutenant Akiko Sato, 35 years old, Imperial Army nurse, newly arrived, hardcore nationalist, true believer. You are all fools if you think this kindness is real. They are fattening you up, making you soft. When they have your trust, they will take everything. You should have died when you had the chance. Hana's voice came out of the darkness, cold and hard. I have 2 children. They are alive because I did not die. That is not foolishness. That is survival. Survival without honor is not survival, Sato spat. It is collaboration. It is treason. Then Yuki spoke, her voice soft but firm. My fiancé died for honor, crashed his plane into a ship. He was 21. He believed dying was transcendence. But I read his last letter. He was terrified. He did not want to die. And now I am alive, and he is dead, and I do not know which of us made the right choice. But I know this. Those children eating bacon this morning, laughing, that was more honorable than any death I have seen. Sato said nothing more. But the division was clear now. Believers and survivors. The camp was splitting. Not along lines the Americans drew. Along lines the women drew themselves. The next morning, Sato stood at the edge of the compound watching the American guards move through their routines. She had been trained to see them as beasts in human skin, animals who lived only for violence and degradation. But what she saw confused her. A young Marine, barely 20, sat cross-legged on the ground outside the fence. He was writing a letter. His lips moved as he wrote, forming words she could not hear. Dear Mum, dear Sally, dear whoever waited for him across an ocean. He paused, rubbed his eyes. Was he crying? Monsters did not cry. Monsters did not write letters home. Another guard approached, older, weathered, said something that made the young one laugh, a rough, tired laugh. They shared a cigarette, talked in low voices. The older one gestured toward the women's compound, said something. The younger one shook his head. Both fell silent. Sato wanted to hate them, needed to hate them. Hate was simple. Hate was clean. Hate made sense in a world that had stopped making sense months ago. But watching them now, she saw something that terrified her more than any cruelty could. She saw men. Just men. Tired men far from home. Men who laughed and cried and missed people. Men who followed orders and counted days until they could go back to lives they had been forced to leave. How dare they? How dare they be human? That afternoon during the meal distribution, Sato refused her tray, stood at the edge of the tent, arms crossed, watching the other women eat, watching the children devour bacon and eggs, watching mothers cry tears of relief. Corporal Washington noticed her, the black cook with kind eyes and gentle hands. He ladled extra portions onto a plate, walked toward her, stopped 5 feet away, set the plate on a stump between them, did not speak, did not push, just placed the food there and walked away. Sato stared at the plate, steam rising, the smell of real food. Her stomach betrayed her, growling so loudly that a nearby child looked up startled. She turned away, walked back to the tent, lay on her mat, closed her eyes, tried to remember the face of the emperor, found only the face of the cook, placing food he did not have to give, walking away without demanding gratitude or submission. That night, hunger clawed at her belly. She thought about the plate on the stump, wondered if it was still there, wondered if animals had taken it, wondered why the thought of wasted food made her want to cry. She had been taught that surrender meant death, that capture meant horror, that the enemy would strip her of everything that made her human. But lying on a clean mat, wrapped in a warm blanket, listening to children breathing softly in sleep, she realized the Americans had not taken her humanity. They had forced her to acknowledge theirs, and that was so much worse. Days became a week. The routine continued: food, medical care, respect, distance. The guards never crossed the invisible boundary, never touched, never demanded. Taro's leg healed. He started playing with other children. Anderson brought a baseball one afternoon, showed Taro how to throw. The boy's first throw was terrible. Anderson laughed, not mocking, delighted, adjusted Taro's grip. Try again. Taro threw. Better. Anderson caught it, tossed it back. Good job, kid. Hannah watched from the tent entrance, watched an American soldier teaching her son to play, watched her son smile, really smile, for the first time since the war started. She thought about the poison paste she had been ready to give him, thought about how close she had come to stealing this moment. Kimiko spent hours talking with Eleanor about faith, about loss, about how to reconcile a loving God with a world that burned. One afternoon they sat in the shade of a medical tent, watching dust motes drift through slanted sunlight. Eleanor mended a torn blanket. Kimiko helped threading needles with steady hands. "Where were you?" Eleanor asked quietly, "when your church was bombed?" "Inside," Kimiko said. "Teaching." "We heard the sirens, but there was no time. The first shell hit the bell tower. Bronze and stone fell like rain. The second hit the nave. 40 people. I knew all their names, all their children's names. I crawled out through a gap in the rubble. My hands were covered in blood, but I could not tell whose blood. Mine, theirs, God's." Eleanor's needle paused mid-stitch. "God's blood." Kimiko nodded. "Yes. Because if Christ is in every person, then when 40 people die in a church, Christ dies 40 times. And I could not understand why he would let himself die like that, again and again, in a place where we worshipped him." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I was in Philadelphia when the telegram came. Pearl Harbor, December 7th. The war was far away until that moment. Then it was in my living room, in my hands, in the words that said my husband was gone. I wanted to hate everyone Japanese, everyone who looked like you, everyone who prayed to different gods or the same God in different languages. Hate was easier than grief." "What changed?" Kimiko asked. "I went to Mass," Eleanor said. "Father O'Brien gave a homily about enemies, about how Jesus commanded us to love them, not because they deserve it, but because hate destroys the hater more than the hated. I sat in that pew, and I wanted to argue with God, to tell him he was wrong, that some enemies are too evil to love, that some losses are too great to forgive. And what did God say back?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "Nothing. He never argues back. He just waits until you are done yelling. And then he puts someone in your path who makes you choose, love or hate, mercy or bitterness, life or death." "Is that what I am?" Kimiko asked. "Someone God put in your path?" "Yes," Eleanor said simply. "You and every woman here, every child, every person who challenges me to see Christ in places I do not want to look, because it is easy to love God when he looks like me, speaks like me, believes like me. The test is seeing him in you." Kimiko looked down at the blanket in her hands. "American wool, army surplus, given to prisoners by enemies. We have a prayer in Japanese," she said. "Itadakimasu. We say it before eating. It means I humbly receive, not just the food, but the life that was given so I could eat, the plant that grew, the animal that died, the person who cooked. We acknowledge the chain of mercy that brings food to our mouths." She held up the blanket. "This is Itadakimasu," she said. "This blanket, this camp, this conversation. I humbly receive the mercy I was taught did not exist, and in receiving it, I must acknowledge the truth. That mercy flows from people I was supposed to hate, that God speaks through enemies, that love is stronger than propaganda. Eleanor reached across the space between them, took Kimiko's hand. That is the most beautiful theology I have ever heard. They sat in silence, two widows holding hands across the wreckage of war. Outside, children laughed. Guards walked patrols. The camp lived its strange, impossible life. And in the space between hatred and love, between enemy and friend, between death and mercy, God waited. Not arguing, not demanding, just waiting to be seen. One evening, Kimiko asked the question that haunted her. Why do you help us? You lost your husband to us. Why do you treat us with kindness? Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Then she answered, because my faith teaches me to see Christ in every person, even enemies, especially enemies. If I only show mercy to people who are easy to love, what good is that? The test of faith is showing mercy when it is hard, when it costs something. You did not kill my husband. The war did. And I refuse to let the war turn me into someone who cannot see your humanity. Kimiko removed her rosary, the one her grandmother had given her, the one she had clutched while holding a knife to her throat. She held it out to Eleanor. Give this to another prisoner someday, someone who needs faith, someone who has lost it. Promise me. Eleanor hesitated. I cannot take this from you. You already gave me more, Kimiko said. You gave me proof that mercy exists. This rosary saved my life that morning. Now let it save someone else's. Eleanor took it slowly, wrapped her fingers around the worn beads. I promise, I will keep it safe, and when I find someone who needs faith more than breath, I will pass it on, with your story, your witness. They embraced, two widows who prayed to the same God through different wars. When they pulled apart, Eleanor tucked the rosary into her uniform pocket over her heart. The beads would stay there for 50 years. August 6th arrived with rumors that spread through the camp like wildfire. A single bomb had destroyed an entire city. Hiroshima, gone in a flash of light. Tens of thousands dead instantly. Kimiko's sister lived in Osaka, close enough to Hiroshima to feel the shockwave. Had she survived? The letter Kimiko had sent weeks ago was still in transit somewhere. Lieutenant Sato stood in the center of the women's compound, voice rising in furious denial. American propaganda. Lies to break our spirit. One bomb cannot destroy a city. It is impossible. But 3 days later, August 9th, another rumor. Nagasaki, another bomb, another city. And this time the name hit Hana like a physical blow. Nagasaki, where her mother-in-law lived. Hana collapsed, just dropped to her knees in the dirt, making sounds that were not quite words. Taro and Aiko clung to her frightened. Murphy gathered the women that afternoon, stood before them with Hayashi translating, choosing his words with visible care. His face was drawn, tired. I will not lie to you. Those bombs killed thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. It is a horror I cannot explain. I cannot defend it. But I will tell you what my commanding officer told me. Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan. It was planned for November. Intelligence estimates said 10 million casualties, Japanese and American, mostly Japanese. Everyone on every island would have fought. Everyone would have died. Women, children, everyone. Those bombs, they ended that. They are the reason you are alive right now. They are the reason I might live to meet my child. And I am going to carry that guilt until the day I die. Yuki stood up, shaking with rage. You dare justify burning children alive. You dare stand here and tell us this was mercy. Murphy met her eyes, did not look away. No, miss. I do not justify it. I hate it. I hate everything about it. But I will tell you what I hate more. I hate that we are in a war where all the choices are terrible. where saving millions means killing thousands. My wife is pregnant. I want to go home and be a father. Those bombs are the reason we get to live. And yes, I will carry that guilt forever, but I will carry it alive. The silence that followed was crushing. Then Kimiko stood, walked slowly to the fence line, made eye contact with Murphy. When she spoke, her English was broken but clear enough. Your God, my God, same God. He weeps today. Murphy's voice cracked. Yes, Ma'am, he does. The war ended 6 days later, August 15th. The Emperor's voice on the radio, Japan surrendered, unconditionally. The war was over. Sato tried to kill herself that night, slashed her wrists with a piece of broken glass. Hayashi found her, pressed his hands against the wounds, screamed for a medic. Doc Riley came running, stitched her up right there on the ground while she screamed at him to let her die. Hayashi held her shoulders. His voice was fierce, angry. I have a family in a prison camp in California. They lost their home, their business, everything, because they look like you, because America was afraid. They are alive, and I am here, and we are all living with things we did not choose. You want to die for a government that sent children to crash planes into ships? Fine, but do it on your own time, not while I am watching. Live. Live and see what the world looks like when you are not being lied to. Sato went limp, stopped fighting. She did not speak for 3 days. When she finally did, the first thing she said was to Kimiko, I was wrong. About the Americans. About everything. I starved myself for 3 weeks waiting to die with honor. Doc Riley saved my life anyway, gave me IV fluids, antibiotics, told me he did not care if I hated him. He took an oath. And I realized I never met a Japanese officer who would say that. The camp began preparing for repatriation. Ships were being organized, routes planned. On a warm September afternoon, care packages were distributed. Inside a clean kimono, a bar of soap, a toothbrush, 2 cans of Spam, 3 chocolate bars, a wool blanket with US Army stamps, $5 in occupation currency, and a medical certificate. Hannah stared at her package, touched the blanket, the chocolate, the soap. This is more than mercy. This is proof. Proof that everything we were told was backwards. Eleanor Davies appeared beside them, smiled sadly. You will need those things on the ship. Anderson appeared at the fence line with a wooden crate. For kids. Inside bottles of Coca-Cola, iced in a bucket, condensation beading on glass. Taro took one confused. Anderson mimed drinking. Taro sipped. His eyes went huge. The carbonation, the sweetness, the cold. He gasped, laughed, drank more. Yuki took a bottle, drank. She looked at Anderson. In Japan, we have nothing like this. Why does America have everything? Anderson shrugged. His answer was simple. I do not know, ma'am. I just know my folks got more food than they need, and you folks did not have enough. Seems like sharing is the right thing. That night, Yuki wrote a final entry in her diary. September 20th, 1945. Tomorrow we leave. We go home to a Japan I do not recognize. I came here ready to die hating Americans. I leave alive and confused. Kenji died believing they were monsters. I lived long enough to learn they were just men, tired men, men who missed their families, men who followed laws even when laws were inconvenient. I do not know how to go home carrying this truth. The final goodbyes happened in the pale light of dawn. The women lined up with their bundles and their children. Guards formed an honor line. Murphy's unit stood at attention, and as the women walked between them, every Marine saluted. Hana saw it first, stopped walking, stared. Why do they salute us? We are defeated. We are prisoners. Hayashi stood nearby. His answer was quiet. You survived. That is worth respecting. Anderson found Taro, knelt down, handed him the baseball they had been throwing. Taro's eyes went wide. He looked at his mother. Hana nodded. Taro took the ball, held it like a sacred object. Anderson ruffled his hair. You keep practicing, okay, kid. Teach it to your kids someday. Tell them an American farm boy taught you. Tell them enemies can be friends. Hayashi found Yuki. She handed him a folded paper, the drawing she had made, an apple tree. On the back she had written in English, James, you proved propaganda wrong. I will remember. Thank you. Hayashi took it carefully. I will keep this forever. Go home. Teach. Tell people the truth. That is how you honor what happened here. Eleanor found Kimiko. She took Kimiko's hands in hers. I thought about what you said, about giving your rosary to someone who needs faith. I will keep that promise. But I want you to know, you gave me proof that God works through enemies, that mercy is stronger than hate. I will carry that witness for the rest of my life, and when I meet someone who has lost faith, I will tell them about you. That is how faith spreads, through stories. Kimiko embraced her, long, tight. When they pulled apart, both were crying. Eleanor touched the pocket over her heart where the rosary rested. Murphy stood at the truck helping women up. When Hannah approached, he stopped her. Ma'am, I want you to know, that first day, when I gave your boy my canteen, that was the best thing I did in this whole war. I have seen too much death. But your boy, smiling after drinking clean water, that I will remember, that I will tell my son about. Hannah's voice was hoarse. What do I tell my children about you? Tell them an American soldier gave their mother water instead of taking her life, and that he is glad he did. The trucks rolled toward the harbor. The voyage home took 14 days. October 12th, Yokohama Harbor, Japan. Home. The ship docked and the women disembarked into a country they barely recognized. Buildings were rubble, infrastructure destroyed. Hana's mother-in-law stood at the edge of the crowd, holding a sign, Hana Taro Aiko. She was thinner than Hana remembered, older, but alive. They crashed together in an embrace that hurt. I thought you chose honorable death, Grandmother Nakamura sobbed. But you are here, you are alive. I was visiting my cousin when the bomb fell, she explained. 20 miles away. I saw the flash. When I returned, my house was gone. Your father-in-law did not survive. But I lived. Hana pulled back. I did not die with honor. I survived without it. I let the Americans feed us. I let them heal Taro. I am sorry if that shames you. Grandmother Nakamura looked at Taro, at his clean face, his bright eyes, at the baseball tucked under his arm. She touched his cheek. You kept them alive. That is the only honor that matters. Kimiko's reunion was quieter. Her sister Michiko waited at a church. Father Tanaka stood with her. We held your funeral, Michiko said. We mourned you, and now you are here. How? The Americans, Kimiko said. They followed Geneva Convention. A nurse prayed the rosary with me, in Latin, in a prison camp. Father Tanaka nodded slowly. The Manila letter was true then. Father Rodriguez was right. Yes, Kimiko said. And now I need to testify. At the tribunals, I need to tell people that not all Americans were cruel. I will help you, the priest said. The truth must be told. Yuki had no reunion. She stood at the displaced persons station for hours. Her family name was on no lists. Her home address was bombed. She had nowhere to go. Kimiko found her there 3 days later. "Come with me to Osaka. Stay with my family. Help me rebuild the church. Teach the children. Teach them the truth. Teach them that enemies can be human, that propaganda lies. Teach them so the next generation does not repeat our mistakes." They traveled to Osaka, to the refugee school operating out of a bombed building. 30 war orphans. Yuki stood before them, opened her bag, pulled out the American blanket, spread it on the ground. "This blanket was given to me by my enemies," she told them, "by people I was taught to hate. But they gave me this, and food, and medicine, and respect. They showed me that the stories I believed were lies. I am going to teach you one thing. Never believe someone is your enemy until you meet them yourself. Never let anyone else define your hatred for you. Think, question, learn." The children stared at her, but they listened. Over the years that followed, Yuki taught them English, history, critical thinking. She taught them to question propaganda, to seek truth. She never married, never had children of her own, but she raised hundreds. Across the Pacific, Murphy returned to Boston. His son had been born September 18th, while Murphy was still on Saipan. He held Daniel Murphy Jr. for the first time on September 20th, wrote in his journal, "I held my son today. I wonder if Hannah's children are okay. I wonder if they remember the baseball. I hope they grow up in a world where kids do not have to hide from soldiers. I hope Danny does too. I hope the mercy we showed was enough." 20 years later, 30, 40. The children grew up. Taro became an English translator for American companies. Aiko became a nurse. Both told their children about the baseball, about the American soldiers who taught them that enemies could be kind. Yuki taught for 40 years, published a memoir in 1978. "They Did Not Touch Us, A Saipan Prisoner's Truth." It became required reading in Japanese schools. Kimiko testified at the International Military Tribunal. Her testimony was used as evidence of humane treatment of prisoners, not to excuse war crimes, but to show that individual choices mattered, that some people chose mercy even when cruelty was easier. She died in 1987, age 84. Eleanor Davies, bedridden in Philadelphia, sent flowers. 50 years after the war ended, a memorial service was held at Saipan, at the ruins of Camp Susupe. Yuki attended, 79 years old. Taro came with his children, brought the baseball in a glass case. Hayashi's daughter came, brought his letters, his journals, the drawing Yuki had given him. Eleanor Davies came in a wheelchair, 89, dying of cancer. She brought something wrapped in silk. Kimiko's granddaughter, Emiko, organized it all. History professor at UC Berkeley, 40 years old. She stood before the crowd and read from her grandmother's diary. August 15th, 1945. "I prepared to die with hatred. I lived with questions. Today I return home with truth. Mercy, not cruelty, won the war for my soul. The Americans did not break my spirit. They restored it. I will remember this until I die, and I pray my grandchildren will remember after." Eleanor Davies struggled to stand. Her daughter helped her. Eleanor held up the silk-wrapped bundle, unwrapped it slowly. Inside, worn wooden beads. Kimiko's rosary. "Your grandmother told me to give this to someone who needs faith," Eleanor said. "I have carried it for 50 years, over my heart, every day. Emiko, I think that person is you." Emiko took the rosary with shaking hands. "Why me?" "Because you are continuing her witness, teaching the truth. That is faith in action. She made me promise to pass it on with her story. So I am keeping that promise. Tell your students. Tell them about enemies who prayed together. Tell them mercy won when hate should have. They embraced. Eleanor died 6 months later. Yuki spoke last. To a crowd of 200, she held Kenji's photograph in shaking hands. This is Kenji Yamamoto. He died believing Americans were monsters. He died for propaganda. I lived 50 more years knowing they were men. Both truths hurt. But only one gave me a future. I hated them because I was taught to. I feared them because I believed lies. But they fed me when I was starving. They healed me when I was sick. They showed me mercy when cruelty was easier. And that mercy changed everything. War makes enemies. Peace requires us to unlearn that. The greatest victory was not Hiroshima, not Nagasaki. The greatest victory was every single moment an American soldier chose mercy when cruelty was easier. That is the America I want young people to remember. The crowd stood, applauded, wept. 1 year later, 1996, University of California, Berkeley. Emiko Watanabe stood before her History 141 class. World War II, Pacific Theater, 53 students, all born decades after the war ended, all shaped by it anyway. She placed 3 objects on her desk, a baseball in a glass case. Taro had donated it before he died. The leather was cracked, but you could still see the signatures. An apple tree drawing yellowed with age, Yuki's gift to Hayashi. The Smithsonian had loaned it for this lecture. And a rosary. Wooden beads worn smooth by 3 generations of hands. The one Eleanor had carried for 50 years before pressing it into Emiko's hands. Emiko held up each object, told the story behind it. The students leaned forward, listening. When she finished, a student raised his hand. Japanese-American, 3rd generation, Professor Watanabe. Do you think we can ever really forgive? After everything? Emiko looked at the rosary in her palm, at the baseball, at the drawing. I think forgiveness is not one choice. It is 1,000 small choices. Every day, every interaction, every time we see someone as human instead of enemy. My grandmother made that choice in 1945, 50 times, 100 times. Every time she accepted food instead of death, every time she prayed with a woman whose husband she was supposed to hate. I make that choice today, when I teach this class. When I tell you that wars are fought by people, not monsters. And tomorrow you will make it too. When you meet someone different, someone from the other side of some divide, you will choose to see them or to hate them. That choice is how mercy echoes. That is how we break the cycle. The class sat in silence. Then one student started clapping, then another, then all of them. The sound filled the lecture hall. Emiko looked out the window. The Berkeley campus stretched green and peaceful below. Students walked to class, laughed, argued, lived, free, most unaware of the mercy that made their freedom possible. But now they knew, and they would carry it forward, generation to generation, mercy to mercy, forever. The story would continue, because mercy once given never truly ends. It transforms, grows, spreads through time like light through water, and somewhere in heaven or memory, or the space between Kimiko and Eleanor and Murphy and Hayashi and all the others who had chosen mercy over hate, watched and knew. The truth would survive, the story would live, and mercy once given echoes forever.